video, I'm going to look in detail at my first 3 build weeks, my first build block of UTMB training, and delve into some of the key metrics I use to monitor my training, and therefore helps me then adapt to future sessions that I have coming up in my training plan. The first element I'm going to look at is Total Training Stress Score, TSS, in Training Peaks. And this looks at essentially how hard each week was. Now, as you can see, the first 2 weeks were actually harder than the third week of the training block, and anyone who's been following my training online will know that that was primarily down to the fact that I had 2 rest days in week 3 due to crashing my bike. But overall, the training stress scores were pretty good, and it marked quite a sizable amount of training for those first 3 weeks. Looking at that in a little bit more detail and how those are comprised, when I start looking at time in various heart rate zones, you can see that there's quite a big difference between week 1 and week 3, for example. Now, overall, there was less time in total spent training in week 3, hence that column being slightly shorter. But if you look at the darker colours, that's the higher training zones. There was a lot more time in zone 6, for example, in week 3. There was more than double than spent in zone 6 in weeks 1 and 2 combined. And that was due to the fact that I did a race in week 3, so I was pushing hard for quite a long period of time, hence that duration being longer. What's quite interesting as well is time in heart rate zone 1. In weeks 1 and 2, they were near identical, 7 hours 14 minutes and 7 hours 15 minutes. That wasn't planned, but I thought it was quite interesting that they were both very similar. But overall, you can see that there was a larger percentage of time spent in the higher heart rate zones in the later weeks. Looking at time in speed zones, this is also reflected. In week 1 there was very little time spent in the upper speed zones despite doing some intervals, but in weeks 2 and 3 a lot more time was spent in the upper speed zones, and this was due to 2 things. In week 2 the duration of the intervals increased, so therefore I was pushing harder, so rather than 3-minute intervals I was doing 4 and 5-minute intervals. And in week 3 it was down to the fact that I did that race, as I mentioned, so I was running harder for a longer period, so that's why there's a lot more time in the upper speed zones. That's also reflected actually looking at the various speeds that I was recording over different distances. So this table now is looking at my peak pace over 400 meters, 800 meters, 1 kilometer, 1 mile, 5 and 10 kilometers. So you can see the fact that I was actually increasing a general trend upwards. Now, it's not uniform because I'll do certain intervals, I might have got a 400 meter slightly faster split, but overall there's a nice increase there in terms of speed. So the speed is going up in general, which is nice to see. So not only am I pushing slightly harder, but the speed's also increasing. However, as I am training for an ultramarathon, there is still an awful lot of time spent in those lower heart rate and speed zones. So lots of long, slow, steady runs, which are typically done on a Sunday for anyone who's been following the progress so far. So what does that mean overall in terms of general fitness and fatigue? Well, this graph is showing 3 elements: my fatigue level, fitness, and also form, which is a combination of the 2. And as you can see, because I'm in a recovery week at the moment, the top line, the fatigue, has been dropping down, and fitness is staying relatively flat. Now, fitness is a rolling 42-day average of training stress score, whereas fatigue is a rolling 7-day average. So that's why fatigue drops a lot quicker than fitness, but also it goes up a lot faster than fitness as well, because it's taking a shorter period to look at. So in summary, everything's moving in the right direction really. This is a recovery week, so it will look very different. I will do another one of these videos in the future, so looking back at a longer period rather than just a 3-week block. We'll look back at, say, a 7-week period, so we'll have a recovery week and 2 lots of build. I will be doing a summary video of my recovery week as well, so every 4th week is a recovery week for me, or a rest week, and that will show a significantly lower level of training stress score at the end of the week. So make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss that. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you next time.